Okay, and because we're just past the half-past mark, I did have to just let the Zoom audience in. So just to the people who have arrived on Zoom, hello. We're just getting a couple of technical things together before we start the event tonight. For you guys, just you will probably want to know that you'll be on silent for the event tonight, but if you want to ask any questions, there's a chat function, and Louis or Oscar will send you a link to the book to purchase the book in the chat function, simultaneously showing you where you can buy the book, but also showing you how you can type into that chat function any of your questions. So if you do have questions, we will be able to get to a few of them, but not all of them, but type them in nice and early as soon as you think of them, and they'll be ready for the end of the event. So as I said, there'll be a couple of more minutes as we just wait for some technical stuff to happen, and then we'll be started. But please feel free to chat amongst yourselves while we're waiting.
Yes. That's my sister. I'm pleased that you read the book so close to now, so it's nice and fresh. Yeah, so I was really happy about that. Thank you for all the podcasts and all that stuff. And you've got quite a nice place, right? Yeah, I liked it.
It is totally a future career. Yeah, I was speaking to.
I've never met her, so I'd love to. Oh, Melanie, lovely to meet you.
Lovely.
Family. And friends. Supporters. Some people like that. That's my editor. Melanie's my editor from Brisbane. Hello. My daughter, my family. Melanie from Brisbane, who's talking to She said it was close. Okay, good. So it's fine. I said that you can't find. She said no. All right.
I saw cigarettes.
How many people?
You're very well fitted. I'm 36 at the moment. You're kidding me. I'm more bored, so they might actually yeah.
Do I ever get to know who zoomed in or not?
Does it engage
Because I just someone just introduced me who came tonight and who lived in yeah, maybe. Here she comes. Here she is.
Great, fantastic. Okay, so just for the people who have just joined us on Zoom, we are just doing a couple of technical things before we start. So just letting you know, I've let you into the room, but it looks quite chaotic here because we're just waiting for a couple of technical things to happen. So just bear with us and we'll start. I can do a bit of banter before we start. I'm very excited to be hosting this event tonight because my family are from Slovenia, neighbours to some of you in the room probably. Left early though and arrived here in the 50s. So yeah, it's really interesting to see where everyone's come from and how they've made it here, and to know that we're all from different parts of the world, which is good. And also it's really great that Bianca is doing the conversation tonight because Bianca, your family came from Italy.
Originally. Yeah, ancestors
from Italy. So, you know, you never quite know where anybody is from and why they're here. But there's always a story to tell. And I think that's really great. Also, if you didn't hear, there was a Radio National interview on the conversation, which was fantastic. So if you're following along at home, you can go onto the Radio National Conversations podcast and you can listen to that there if you didn't hear it live. I think they replay them too, don't they? They replay them this Sunday, I think. So, yeah. Welcome. Come through. There's seats in the second row if you can't. Oh, you've got seats in the back. Excellent. All right. We might be very close to starting. You're right? Great. Okay. Well, look, it's my great pleasure to host tonight. I'd like to start by acknowledging the actual people from Australia, the traditional owners of the land that we're living on, the Yagra people and the Turrbal people in this area. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And also because this is on Zoom, I'd also like to acknowledge that we're zooming out onto the lands of many different Aboriginal people and to acknowledge their elders, past and present as well. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land and sovereignty was never ceded. I, for one, feel very lucky to be on this land and to be in a storytelling culture that is thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. So it's really exciting to be here. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Debra Gavranich, Debra grew up on a sugarcane farm near Mossman in Far North Queensland. Both her parents were born on the Croatian island of Korčula, near Split, very close to my people.
Yes.
But her father's family migrated to Australia in the 1920s to work in the Canefields. Much later in 1952, her mother came out as a Proxy Bride. Debra has travelled extensively and lived and worked overseas. She has a dream to divide her time between the islands of Croatia, where most of her extended family still live, and the tropical city of Cairns, where she works as a physiotherapist and lives with her husband and family. Everybody welcome Debra. And with us to have a conversation tonight with Debra is Bianca Milroy, who is an emerging Brisbane-based writer and editor. In 2020, Bianca's unpublished historical fiction novel, The Solitary Light, was shortlisted for the Queensland Literary Awards, which are being held tomorrow, actually, the next one. Her award-listed short stories have been published in anthologies such as RMIT's Visible Ink and Writing Queensland. In 2021, she combined creative forces with local author Steve Kaplan and publisher and also books to edit historical fiction novel Paradiso, which has been on our bestseller list for a long time. So let's knock it off with this event tonight. Far too long, months. Now it's your turn in the sun, I think. Love you, Steve. Probably watching on Zoom. Where was I? And so Bianca has also edited and contributed to 3 anthologies, most recently Lighthouse, published in 2020. Bianca is a proud team member of Auslit and hosts event for us at Avid Reader as often as she can, including tonight. Here is Bianca.
Thanks so much, everyone, and for joining us both in person and online. What a turnout. I'm very excited, and I know I speak for many. I too, thank you, Chrissy, by the way, your acknowledgement just resonates with me so much. I don't think I could do it justice, but I wanted to also pay my acknowledgement and deep respect to the traditional custodians of the land that we're on, the Yagra and Turrbal people, and to acknowledge this place on Boundary Street, which has always been significant for community and storytelling. What an honour to be with you here tonight, Debra, to launch The Girl Who Left. You've travelled from Cairns to be here tonight, and there's family and there's friends and there's newcomers who are probably very avid readers as well. So Cairns is also my hometown, and we have so much to unpack in this discussion. You're the experienced traveller here, so if I've packed too much in my suitcase of questions, please feel free to jump in. I'm just about to pass over to you. However, you're going to take us on a journey tonight from the ancient stone-walled Croatia all the way to the steamy cane fields of the tropical north. So first of all, Debra, can I ask you to set the scene? Where are we when we first meet Marija Nadalo in 1950? And what is life like for her and her family?
Okay, her name is Marija Nadalo.
My apologies.
No, that's okay. Our names are very difficult to pronounce. If someone says Gavranich properly, I say, have I met you before? So yeah. I'm very used to the mispronunciations. The book opens, I'm presuming you're asking me, it's around when the book opens. Marija is probably about 18. She lives with her family in this beautiful little town called Blato on the island of Korčula, which is just an amazing island, just in between Split and Dubrovnik, in what was called it was Yugoslavia back then. It was a republic. There was 6 states, and they'd just been through World War II. And we will probably talk about the war later, but it wasn't a good time. It was a hard time. Her sister was a partisan. She helped the rebels. The big thing was they were hungry. She had no food. And this country was trying to find itself after the war. She was a staunch Catholic. Her whole family was, and former Yugoslavia was communist after the war. General Tito established this country. It had royalty before, and it became communist, and which was very hard for my mother because of her Catholicism, and so her education had stopped, and she was working on their farm. They had a little vineyard. They were poor. But she was, yes, just surviving after the war, and then this opportunity arises.
And, it's certainly obvious for me as a reader that your knowledge of Croatia and the place, having been there a few times, and
have
just
you?
So no, sorry, you have.
Yeah.
In contrast, me, I've left Australia once to go to New Zealand, and that was about it. So
you're missing out.
However, you situate the reader in a way in the writing of this book, and if I could indulge the audience in a couple of very brief descriptions, just to give you an idea of the kind of writing that is in this beautiful book and the scene setting. So it felt as if time had paused in Blato. The bleak mountains and the fig trees, the vineyards and the olive trees, the old stone houses. The linden trees still lined the main street, their branches interlinked like a guard of honour above the busy, narrow thoroughfare. On top of the hill, surrounded by trees, was the church, small in size but a significant beacon to the people. In the far distance, the Adriatic Sea.
Did I write that?
Oh,
that sounds so good. Whoa.
That's very funny to have you read that.
It is. It's like, wow, no one's read it to me.
These are just key moments that sort of stuck out to me that made me really feel like I was there. And something that resonated with me was, on reflection, saying, I spent many hours in Croatia on sun-kissed patios under grapevines, capturing stories of my mother's childhood from the fading memories of her siblings. So for anyone who isn't familiar yet with the story, it is obvious from the moment you pick this book up that it's not just a historical account and a true story, but above all, it's your family's story.
It is.
So I'm going to go into more detail about what drew you to writing the story, given you don't necessarily come from a writing background.
I'm a physio.
But could you give us a brief insight into who our main characters are and your connection to them?
Well, the main character obviously is my mother, and the story's not about her whole life. It's sections of her life, mainly from when the war came to her village when she was 9, and her life through the war, which about a third of the book is about the war, because I found that quite fascinating. This is a woman and what she'd experienced. She hadn't told us a lot about that, so I did a lot of research. So she's the main character. And another amazing character is my father, who was on the other side of the world in Cassowary Valley in Mossman, and his sister And his sister's daughter's here tonight. Betty, put your hand up, which is just Auntie Mary's daughter and granddaughter, which is just wonderful. And they're the three main characters, I feel, in my book. And my mother's sister, Teta Shulva, Auntie Shulva, is her younger sister. So we've got two characters in Australia and the two characters in Croatia. And also my mother's father was quite an important person.
And the story really propels you from page 1 because that's the inciting incident. So you know from the very get-go that you're going to be with Marija on this voyage. So could you just go into a little bit more detail on what a rugged young cane farmer in Mosman, Australia, possibly could have to do with a beautiful but pragmatic 19-year-old in a tiny island village in Croatia?
Becca, that's interesting because we don't really know, because my parents passed on so early, why he did that. Because according to Auntie Mary, my dad was in his mid to late 20s, good looking. I mean, you see the photo in the book, very good looking, had girlfriends, but for some reason went to the old village, the old town to get a wife. And from what my auntie over there said, the Mosman girls just wanted to shop. They didn't want to work on the farm and they would be isolated. So, someone from the old country probably would be satisfied to come and live this sort of life. So this is and proxy marriages did happen, not a lot, but it did, proxy marriages, because my auntie in Feluka Tully, she was a proxy bride at 15. And she's my godmother as well. But that was him wanting this bride. And then for my mum, this was just an opportunity. She was worried war was going to come back to the country, and it did much later. But she had lived through the war, and she was brave, and she was adventurous, and she just wanted a better life, basically.
So for anyone who's not familiar with the term, proxy bride.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want me to explain?
Yeah.
It's not an arranged marriage. It's two people sort of like my grandfather wrote back, I think, to one of his friends saying, my son wants a wife. Do you know anyone? They talk around and,
It's a small village.
It is a small village. Yes, very. They all know each other. And my mother, they said, Marija would be good. She goes to church. She's, works hard, blah, blah, blah. And so they then send a photograph to each other to see if they like the look of each other, because that's important. And they were both very good looking. We got a good gene pool there. I mean, just like my kids. And nieces and nephews.
Yes, right.
And then they write to each other. And then my father apparently said, well, come out. I'll pay for you to come out and live with my family. If we like each other, we will get married. Because that happened in Italy. The Italians could do that because they weren't communist. Yugoslavia was communist. She was not allowed to leave the country because she had no sponsors. She had no husband. And so they did a proxy marriage where my father's cousin over there, Kuzma Anic, stood in as the groom. So there's a beautiful wedding photo of mum in a beautiful dress. Dad sent over this fabric. They made up a dress. She had a veil, her bouquet. Strange-looking man, not Dad, standing beside him. And it was a legal marriage. They weren't allowed to get married in the church. That was illegal because of communism. And so they got married, and it took a whole year before all the papers were processed before she could come out, 4 to 6 weeks on a boat, and a year later meet her husband, a year after she'd married him. So it was proxy. Someone stood, it's called procurement over there. Someone stands in for the groom. So that is a legally binding marriage.
And for that gorgeous wedding dress to come about as well, those sorts of materials were so scarce during that time. What were they making, some wedding dresses out of?
Parachutes left over from the war. So that was the only fabric. And so my auntie said that Dad sent over this fabric, and after she left it for a younger sister who wore it. And then when I've been back many times, I'm now a citizen. Woohoo! Woo! They won't get rid of me. And my auntie told me that after she left, 24 brides in the village wore her wedding dress. And I said, you're kidding me. Hope they're all the same size because it was really fitted.
So back to just where we're up to with the story and I guess the trajectory from the proposition. From the outset, do you feel that Marija wanted to go ahead with this proxy marriage? Do you get the sense that that this laddie Mladen had, what he had to offer, and because Marija really struck me as someone very loyal to her family, to her faith, and to keeping faith and making
absolutely, yeah, that's exactly right. And I think when I talked to my auntie there, she said she didn't want to do it because in her words she actually said, I'm not brave enough. I will stay poor, but I will stay here. She didn't want to do that. But my mother, I think, was courageous and could see the opportunity. But also, like, her father was very sad to have her go, but her mother said, go, you'll get a better life. And also there was not enough food, one less to feed, go. And then my mother actually helped the family. She sent back money and sent back gifts and things like that. So I think my mother was probably very sad, but probably saw it as an opportunity. Yeah, she was very, very brave, our mother.
So Debra, a good portion of the book is based in Croatia during the horrifying years of World War II and twice occupied Blato. In fact, chronologically, the story begins in 1941 where Marija is 9. So I want to come back to the extensive research that you've done and, the inclusion of maps and photographs in the book, which I love.
Thank you.
For now, could you share maybe 1 or 2 accounts from those formidable years in Marija's childhood? And I think one that particularly resonated with me was the story about the flag.
Yes, it's quite interesting because when I went there a few years ago, I did a lot of research, as you kindly said, and I found a book in the Croatian library that had every month what happened during the war in Blato. All the events, who was killed, their names, their ages, how they were killed, everything. And there was this flag incident where the Partisans, who were the rebels, raised this flag on the hill and in a rebellion against it was the Italian occupiers, because Italy occupied first and then Germany. And I had written about this story, and then my cousin's son, Ante, said to me, he said, did you know that your auntie, my teta Jova, was the girl that had the flag and wrapped it around her waist in a scarf, and her and my mother went up to the fields where my grandfather was working and gave him the flag that he then gave to the Partisans. And so my aunt was this integral person in this story, and if they were caught, they would have been killed. It wasn't a game, but it was the rebels, the Partisans, showing this is our village. We don't want to be occupied. So that was a lot of people were killed. For example, when the Germans occupied, and this is a story all over during World War II, if one German soldier got killed, they just randomly killed 15 civilians. That was just what happened. And for us in safe Australia, so hard to even imagine that happening. Very, very sad.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think even though Marija's sister Jova, is that correct? Jova, perhaps stated that she wasn't brave enough to follow in her sister's footsteps. What she did was, in fact, quite an act of bravery in itself.
Absolutely. They helped the Partisans a lot with children.
Yeah, and just the effect of communism on the small village, incredibly in terms of their schooling, language, faith. It was just all affected every aspect.
Well, it did. Well, communism was later, but the Italians kept the school open, but the teachers had to teach in Italian. So that helped my mother when she was on the boat from Italy. She could understand something, so that was good. But when the Germans came, the schools were shut down. So effectively her education finished like when she was like 11 or so. And when the war was over, it was too late. She was too old to go back to school. And she was a smart lady, my mum.
Did she ever, this is going off script here, but did she ever sort of hint at, a desire for an education or a particular career?
Oh, yes. Yeah. She wanted to be a home economics teacher. She was an amazing cook, but also she, as my brother who is here will say, she was the most wonderful seamstress. She made my wedding dress and a whole heap of wedding dresses. She was very clever and she taught herself to sew. This is something, no one taught her. She just had a gift. She was very creative. So that's what she would have loved to have been, she said.
So now we have an idea of the environment that Marija was coming of age in, the prospect of a Croatian husband in another country. Her father had also been to Broken Hill in New South Wales, and he came back. So this started to seem a bit enticing for Marija. What information did Laddie and Marija exchange in those early days? I'm thinking here, was there a bikini shot or studio photo?
They were only supposed to exchange studio photos, and my mother went to split, and they're in the book, the two studio photos, but my mother apparently slipped in a photo of her in her togs. Were they bikinis? Or a four-piece? Short. Well, showed lots of legs. My mother had good legs, and apparently her mother, when she found out, was horrified that my mum had sent this photo of her, but it obviously helped.
So she travelled to the island. Was it to Split?
Yeah, to the mainland to get, because there was no photographer on the island and you needed studio photos. She wanted to impress this cane farm. To make sure he liked the look of her. It'd be a bit shameful if he said, "Oh no, you're not good enough." And then they wrote letters to each other. So I don't know how many or how long it went on for, but eventually the proxy marriage took place. But that's why I said it's not arranged. They are under no obligation, but she was certainly, I think there was certainly a bit of pressure for her to say yes. So she was very grateful that he was good looking to start with, as well as a nice person. He stayed good looking. That came out wrongly.
But also Laddie was a man of few words. So, but despite what his letters might have given an insight to and the photo, she really didn't get that sense of who he was as a person.
He wasn't a letter writer.
No.
He wasn't a letter writer. Like, he wrote letters to me when I was at school and they were like little bits of paper, what he would have written to her about.
Cricket scores in the tennis.
Cricket scores in the tennis, probably. She go, I don't know what you're talking about.
I can't even imagine the sense of anticipation that that Marija would have felt boarding the ship. So fast forward to 1952, we join Marija across Yugoslavia by train to Italy and eventually aboard the ship MV Australia. So marriages by proxy weren't all love at first sight, including Marija's, who, to her surprise, was waiting to greet her on arrival in Sydney Harbour.
Well, I didn't know this story, and I interviewed one of the neighbours who lived on a neighbouring farm last year, and she actually told me the story. So this is really good to gather information that my father wasn't allowed to go down. He had to stay on the farm, and his father, my grandfather, her father-in-law, waited for her as she got off the ship. And I could just imagine what she would have felt. Maybe she thought, oh, my God, my husband's really old and he sent a photo of me when because that happens. And I thought, oh, man, I've married an old man. or she realised it was her father-in-law. She probably thought, why isn't he? My neighbour said that my grandfather wasn't very nice, and he actually paraded her around to all the Croatian, Yugoslav people in Sydney saying, look at this new bride my son has got. And she was really frightened of him, apparently my neighbours said, really frightened. And then they had to get on a train and go all the way up to Cairns until she eventually met my wonderful father.
And that would have been one long train trip.
With a man like that, yes, I think so.
Yeah, Jack sounds like quite the intimidating character.
He was.
So in contrast, how did her long-awaited meeting with Laddie eventuate? And was she able to celebrate a wedding that wasn't alongside a standing groom?
Yes, they had a honeymoon up in Korčula apparently, and then I've got a photo in the book of their wedding celebration on our farmhouse in Cassowary Valley, because we have long verandas that they used to hold dances at, so they put trestle tables, and they had a wedding there. So that was probably, I think it was a month after she arrived. I've got the date, yeah, and they celebrated there, and she was I think relieved that she'd finally met her husband, and my father was a lovely man. So that's lovely. Good for her.
And wonderful that you had those photographs there, you know, to inspire the writing and to sort of draw out, you know, information from, both, you know, I guess fact and, you know, what you had to approximate.
Well, I could see what was on the table, what they were eating, and and what she was wearing, and we got all these photos restored. So, you know, it's wonderful for my family that I wrote this book, because as a result I've restored lots of photos.
So on the cultural aspect of the story, the Far North is quite a melting pot for diverse ethnicities. How did Marija fit in when she arrived? She spoke no English, and for, you know, when she arrived to this, for lack of a better word, alien kind of landscape. What struck me as profound, well, I'll let you actually answer that one first, and then I've got a response that I'd like to share as well.
Absolutely. It wasn't easy. I mean, she came to this house, it was isolated, it was on a farm. She'd come from a village where she lived, you know, with her family and like all her cousins and in close proximity. So she was from a little town, and here she was isolated on this farm. When the cane grew, you could see one farmhouse from our farm, and that was all from our farmhouse. And the cane grew. She told us she would stand on the chair in the kitchen and look through the window to see the roof, to feel that there was someone else there, because eventually, first of all, she was there with her father-in-law and her sister-in-law, but my auntie married a year later, and it was just, and the grandfather moved out as well. So it was just mum and dad, and it was very isolating. And just, you consider being in Far North Queensland from Europe. I mean, the snakes, the cane toads, the curlews at night, they frightened me as a kid until I finally looked and went, what? That was what I used to be scared of when I was little. You know, they sound so scary. And there was bandicoots, there was, you know, all this wildlife. She had, you know, kangaroos, cassowaries, nothing she was familiar with, and the heat and and the language barrier. You know, it was tough. You know.
I hear there's a few dubious shopping lists she was given.
Yes, and they played lots of tricks on her. My dad was a bit of a larrikin, and his sister, Auntie Mary, was a larrikin. And that's what I was talking to Auntie Mary the other week, and said, oh, we did some terrible things too. They loved playing tricks on her, but she had a great sense of humour, and she played a lot, and she learned English really quickly.
Marija took it all in her stride, I'm sure. So what struck me as really profound was this line. It's on page 190 in the book. For migrant women, food was food that cemented the cultural bonds. Now, what food items was Marija particularly fond of, and how is that sense of being around a table, you know, so important?
Oh yeah, food. The word to eat in Croatian is yeti, yeti. And I've got a friend here, Lynn, show your hand. She came to Croatia with me the first time I came back, and poor Lynn couldn't speak English, and I could speak I couldn't speak Croatian. She wasn't very smart, this physio. She couldn't speak any Croatian, and my family couldn't speak. And this is just sidetracking on the food. And my family couldn't speak any English, and so I'd be there communicating, and they just make Lynn eat. You know, yeti. Poor old Lynn ate for 2 weeks. So. Yes, and food is really important, and like even the launch we were going to have in Cairns that got postponed. Poor old Suzanne here spent a whole day cooking one of the recipes in the back called krustali, and we're going to serve typical Croatian food at our launch in Cairns, because food is so important, and they really, that you need to eat. And one of my mother's favourite food was bread. She had no bread. Yeah, she had nothing. And
to come on the ship when they're sort of being served bread with a bread roll with every meal.
She would hide them in her pocket because she thought it was going to end, and then she found 24 bread rolls in her cupboard because she thought the food would stop, because she'd never had food. She'd been hungry basically all her life. And so food was very important, and gathering with anyone who's Croatian here. Yeah, we've got a few of us, you know. Yeah, food is so important, and it's the olive oil, and it's the fish, and it's the zayos are wonderful. And I've got recipes in the back of my book that a lot of my friends actually have been cooking and sending me photos. I'm going, that doesn't look right. But they said it tasted good.
There you go. Not only treated to the story and the photographs and the maps, but there's also recipes,
Yes.
Marija's recipes in the back. And I'm glad that you just clarified the pronunciation for, I'm not going to do it justice this time, but for to eat in Croatian.
Yeti.
I was thinking in my head, oh yeah, Jedi.
Come on, Star Wars. Silent J.
So I think that's where we're going to leave this story. But because I know really there's two types of people in the audience this evening, those who have read the book and those who will be getting their copy signed at the end. So on that note, if you do have any questions, have them ready for Debra, and we're going to go fairly soon to questions. I'm getting the signal. Thank you, Chrissy. So yeah, have them ready. Zoom, if you're on Zoom or in the audience, you know what to do. So where was I? I was going to ask more about now 5 minutes, and I still had more to cover. But I think,
really need to hear the song.
yeah, and the song as well. So I
Yes.
think if we have time for one question about the publishing.
Yes, I would love to. I'd love to give a lot of shout out. I've actually got an editor here tonight, Melanie. Yes, who did my edit on my book, and thank you so much. I've never met Melanie except on Zoom, and she was wonderful. She suggested the postscript, which just worked beautifully. Thank you so much. And Catherine Lewis from Wildingo Press, if you're watching this, thanks for the flowers, and you're amazing. Wildingo Press has just been wonderful. I thought I was going to self-publish, and then I thought, I'll just see what's out there, and Catherine took me on, and she believed in my story. And Catherine and Rachel McDermott, my publicists, they've just been, they're a dream team. They're amazing. So I'm very grateful, and a big shout out to you ladies.
Yes, thank you very much. A round of applause. And Rachel and Melanie and Bernadette, who's the other author as well, and everyone involved, because it really does take a village to publish a book, as I like to say.
I've been very lucky, very fortunate with my team.
And I wanted to say as well, how did that connection happen, between going, okay, I'm going down the self-publishing route as far as being a story for your family for the generations, to suddenly being a book that's being launched at Avid Reader.
I know. Who would believe? Oh my goodness!
How did you get to know Catherine?
Well, I was just going to self-publish because I thought no one would be interested in my family story. It was for my kids, for the nieces and nephews. It was for us, just to preserve. And I thought it was too personal anyone to be interested. And then we were going down the self-publishing route. We had the cover, we had the printer ready to roll, and I got a bit bored because I'd written, so I thought I'll just test the waters, and lo and behold, people wanted to publish. And so I kind of went, oh wow. And I just said, Catherine was wonderful, she's just so good. And I said, look, you can't change the story, because this is my mother's story. Some of these people are still alive. We've got to remain true. You can't make it commercial. And she promised me she wouldn't change anything, and she didn't. And also, Auntie Mary's 90, and she'd been hanging out. She kept saying, I'm not getting any younger. When are you getting the story out? And I said, we've got to get it out quickly. And she promised me in 5 months, and she did it.
Wow.
And so, and they've been wonderful. And my Auntie Mary's now read it, and I'm happy.
Can't ask for anything more than that. And your family's here, and the people who
I've got
show
a big
their
support.
in
Everyone's
way.
been on this journey with me. I've got an amazing family. Michael, Steph, David and Michelle, you've been just incredible and so supportive. Big shout out to my family.
On that note, I think we'll go to the song.
Yes, can I just say a little bit about it? I've got a wonderful friend here, Bron, show yourself, yes, who when I started, she heard about the book. She said, I'd really like to write a song for it. And I went, oh, wow. Bron's a very accomplished music teacher. And I wrote the lyrics and she tweaked them. So we combined our efforts on the lyrics, and she she researched Croatian music, and it sounds like when you listen to the song, you'll feel like you're in Croatia. But the chorus, it's called "Speak to Me." And when my wonderful mother, if we rang her or came to her door, her first words would always be, "Speak to me, darling, speak to me." And that's what the actual chorus is. And this is a beautiful song. Thank you, Bron.
It's my pleasure to
We can share it.
it was my pleasure to write a musical gift, I suppose. And I did it because I was so struck with the story. I thought, what an amazing, courageous woman to just spread this blanket of love over all her family and everything. So I hope that you enjoy the song. It's not a top 40 hit.
It doesn't need to be. It already is.
Some people get stuff from the body shop for their friends. I write them a song, but I just wanted to write something that reflected her background and the courageous woman that she was and the way she spread love through her lives.
Thanks, Bron. It's beautiful.
Should I do it?
Yes, yes, go for it.
Years ago to Australia, you came across the sea. So young and so hopeful, a husband yet to meet. All alone, leaving your home and family. Oh, Marija, a one-way ticket to an unknown destiny. A sugar farm became your home, the busy years passed by. Your husband's arms around you, through the laughter and the tears. A sweet kind mother to a family, through all those sunlit years. And you would say, speak to me, my darling, our mother and our friend. Matter to the little ones, on you they could depend. Speak to me, my darling, surrounded by love. It's been a while since you've been gone, but in all of us, our little love you lives on. Sewing clothes for the family, looking after friends. You remember those across the sea, with love and gifts to send. Your loving devotion like a warm blanket settling over all. So tender, we miss you. Catch us when we fall. And you would say, speak to me, my darling, our mother and our friend. Matter to the little ones, on you they could depend. Speak to me, my darling, surrounded by
choked up before. And I needed to reach for the box of tissues when I finished the book as well. So, but definitely laughter and tears. Definitely. What an honour and a journey to have that encapsulated in both a book and a song.
I know.
When's the film coming?
Well, film producers are reading it at the moment, apparently, and there's a big shout out. For those of you who don't know, Eric Bana is is really Eric Banadinovic. He's Croatian, so the call out is for Eric. If you're listening, his agent, he's a dead ringer from my dad. We're not sure about mum yet. There's a lot of people in the audience have been asking to be special parts, but so we're waiting for Eric.
We've got some questions online that I might throw to you. So Tony Craig says, Vala, Debra, and you say hello the same way as the Slovenians do as well. Yeah. So, and Tony says, our grandparents, who are actually called Franco and Jakica Gavranich, came out from Blato in the 1920s, and we don't really know any details of their trip or what their lives were like on the island, but your story is filling in some of the gaps for us.
Oh.
So this is a really beautiful thing about these books, is they touch the hearts of other people.
I've had messages every day from all over Australia, Croatian and non-Croatian, but a lot of people from Blato. I mean, they're Gavranich, but it's like Smith. I mean, we're not related, but but still, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
That's fantastic.
Thank you.
There's also apparently there's an author of the Anthology of Slovenian Music in the audience tonight.
Oh, wow.
Is that true? Maybe it's online. Maybe it's one of the online people, but I'd be very keen to know about that as well for my people.
Dobro.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a couple of other questions online as well. Katerina has said, I was born in Croatia and specifically, sorry, I don't know what that is, for such a book and was delighted to find Debra's, searching probably for such a book and was delighted to find Debra's book. So that's just a comment. So another one
Lovely.
of those ones.
Thank you. Thank you.
But Katerina has asked, what prompted you to start writing the book? Was there a moment? Or did you think that you always wanted to tell the story and just decided to do it?
Always wanted to tell it. Always
Right.
a fascinating story, and it's been my passion, and I finally did it.
Wow, fantastic. That's great. I think that's the end of, there's a couple more comments online, but are there any questions from the audience here? So anybody here has a question? Yes.
No, I'm a physio. I'm a dizzy physio. I do vestibular dysfunction, and it's my passion, and I work 4 days a week in Cairns and dizzy clinics and help people. And yeah, a couple, so be careful. I'm watching. No, not at this stage. This was the thing I wanted to do, and I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be an avid reader or on Conversations with Sarah Konoski. This is just amazing. I'm just a little bit like.
And I'll second Chrissy's plug of the podcast Conversation with Sarah, because I listened to it just the other day and it was just extraordinary.
Oh, thank you. She's an amazing editor.
Maybe read the book first.
Yes, it gives a lot away.
Yeah, they don't hold secrets on the conversation. Any other questions from the audience? Yes.
Well, thank you. It's a very fascinating story. That fascinating way it's all come together. But do you think that there's been a specific moment, because there are a few books around now about people who've come to Australia in that wave of post-war immigration, and originally, I think life was pretty tough for those people, and that they in many ways they didn't get the support that is given to immigrants coming into Australia now. So do you think there's a moment where we've now hit where actual Australian readers or people that have been here for many years, they're ready to hear these wonderful stories and to see them as part of the strength that makes up the Australian psyche?
I totally agree with you. I think we're such a lucky country, and we're a country of migrants or descendants of migrants. And I think I've been contacted by many people, not just Croatians, who have just loved this story. And I think we're quite proud of the potpourri that we have in our country. And I think a lot more people are writing. And the fact it's a true story, I think people are really grasping on that true story and wanting to hear not just about a Croatian immigrant. It could be an immigrant from Iran. It could be an immigrant from Italy. It could be anything. And I think we are just a kaleidoscope. We are. And I think people are enjoying. I've just been amazed by the response and people wanting to and people telling me their stories. I've had lots of people telling, not necessarily Croatian, but their stories from Wales or from wherever. And I think there's a story in everyone. So, there might be a few people out here should get their family stories down.
I think one of the things that I've noticed too is that there was a wave of people who have just arrived here telling their stories of travelling from somewhere to here, but now is the time that people who were born here, first generation Australians, are beginning to write their stories. So this is a new thing, and you're part of a wave of a new storytelling.
That's interesting.
People telling those stories.
Yeah, and you'd know that being in avid reader.
Absolutely. It's a new thing. It used to be you had to, the story was people wanted to know that trip from over if you'd come over from Croatia, but now people are really interested in the stories of people whose parents are from elsewhere.
And as I say, I've written this for our family, just to pass on so that they knew the story.
Cool. I don't think there's any more from online. Any other questions from the audience? Oh, heaps. Yes.
What was the hardest bit of information to deliver from the book? So, like in the collection of stories that we got from our family and friends, what was the most difficult?
That's a good question, Sarah. Why did Dad pick a Proxy Bride? I still am not really sure. And why didn't we ask him growing up? Dad, why don't you go get Mum from over there? You think you know the answer? No.
I spent many years intermittently sewing with Marija because we both love sewing, and we made all sorts of things together. And she told me that she thought that Dad had known all the girls from Croatia in that local area and up on the tablelands, and none of them just quite fitted. So he thought he'd write home.
Well, and also that's what the neighbours said, that all the Mossmen had girlfriends and they just wanted to shop, and so there was, I guess the community was small and he was getting on and hadn't met. But I would have loved to have asked Dad himself, and that's probably the hardest thing, I think, to find out.
Someone on Zoom has asked if we can repeat the question for them when it comes. So are there any other? There's a question at the back. Yep.
Yes, Donna.
Oh. We're a book club here from the Gold Coast and support you. Woo! We could do book club questions online. And number 2, will you talk to the illustration of the cover of the book display?
Yes, my good friend Janine Nicklin. This is Donna's brought her book club up from the Gold Coast, and they wanted if I could answer questions online and talk about the cover. Janine Nicklin's a really dear friend of mine. When we were self-publishing, she was designing this beautiful cover, which she did an amazing job on. And Janine, it's gone national, and it looks like might have a Croatian publisher. So I said, you're going international, girl. We had a Croatian launch in Blato. I contacted the library and said, look, I finished the book. You gave me a lot of information. You want a copy? They said, we want to launch you. And we launched it about 2 weeks ago. It was 4:30 in the morning here. These girls were in their PJs on the screen. We had people zooming in from all over Australia and France and Croatia, and they made a big deal of it. It was a very, very special. We taped it, launched, and they had an interpreter there, and I spoke a bit of Croatian, but basically English, and they interpreted, and my cousin Frank was represented the family and said beautiful words about the book, and it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And they actually, the library I follow their Facebook page, the library, and the library last week they did a little library talk in the nursing home in Blato, and a lot of the people there knew my mother.
Wow.
And I kind of went, oh, yeah, that's amazing. You know, this is a small village, but it's a beautiful village. I think I've just boosted their tourism by 200%.
There was a question over there, yes?
Yes.
You may not be able to answer this. In your book, you told us about what life was like in Blato the last time you were visiting. Has anything changed?
Yes.
Can we repeat that question? Sorry.
The question was, I discussed what life was like in Blato the last time my mum visited, and it was 1995. She was unwell with her illness, and the war was still happening. It was the Homeland War, which went on for about 5 years, and we sort of got her home because she saw tanks rumbling past and things like that. So, yes, the answer is yes, things have changed because Croatia is now independent. So they're their own country. They're a fiercely proud country. There's only 4 million in Croatia. It's the most beautiful country. Who's been there? Yeah, well done, guys. You know, like I've been lots of times, and it's beautiful. The people are wonderful, food's wonderful, and they're very proud. They almost won the World Cup soccer. How good is that? And, you know, and Goran Ivanisevic, you know, he's from tennis players. He's from Split, you know, and they're a very distinctive country. They're very tall, very good looking. All my cousins that might be listening, and high cheekbones. They're just beautiful people, and they're very proud of their country. Very proud.
Can I have one more question if there is one out there? One more question? No, just at the back, and then we'll finish.
John?
Yes, I know you, John.
Ron's primary carer that played a great
Her personal assistant, you mean?
I haven't actually read your book yet. Encouraged to start tonight.
Thank you.
My grandmother came out to Australia after the war. She spent 40 years writing blue letters back to the UK. She missed her family. Did your mum ever, obviously a friend here, acknowledge that she did get an opportunity to move home? Did she ever yearn for life, pre-war life?
I'll repeat the question. John's mother was from the UK and spent 40 years here and wrote lots of letters home and really missed her family. Is that right? Yep. And he asked if my mother ever yearned for her family. Of course she would have. You know, she loved her father, and he passed away while she was here. She never got to see him again, which was her big fear. She loved her family. She went back twice, once in 1974 after we sold the farm, and again when she was unwell. Yes, when my older sisters say when she used to get letters from back home, she used to have to run to the toilet and cry. You know, it was, you know, she'd left everyone. She was so lucky that my dad was so good and my auntie, but this was her family, this is her culture, everything. But having said that, she was so grateful to Australia. She really appreciated what Australia gave her because she'd gone through war and hunger, and Australia was the lucky country. And she brought us up to be, we were very aware of our heritage and our family back home, but we were Australians, and she considered herself Australian as well. But that part of her heart did belong back there. I'm sure. I mean, John, would you agree, my brother? Yes.
And a few words later.
He's like Larry. Spud.
That's fantastic. Look, this has been a really, really excellent night. As you can tell, the book has got lots more to offer. We've only just scratched the surface tonight. So we are going to get to the most exciting part of the evening in a minute, which is where you get to get your book signed, which is very great. But I'd like to thank Bianca for doing such a fantastic job of the questions. Thank you, Bianca. Thanks again for Debra for launching your book here. This is
I'd like to thank everyone for coming. It's just been, I didn't have to rent a crowd by the looks of it.
And 40 more people on Zoom, so that was great too.
Wow, well, thank you for all the Zoomers.
What we are going to do now for people in the real room is we're going to get Debra to her table first before we actually leave to make that quicker. So remember that we can only have about half of us inside at the time, unfortunately. So we'll have to have some lingerers here or out the very front of the shop as well. So we'll get Debra to a table first. If you are on Zoom, you can click that link and you can purchase the book. If you want to give us a call on 3846 3422, pay over the phone, we can get a personal inscription for you. So yeah. So that is 3846 3422. If you call us in the next, half hour, we can get a personal inscription for you. But Debra, we might get you through. And remember, we do need masks to go to the shop. So we might get you.
If I hold my drink, am I okay? I'll get you out now, but I might have to hold your mask. Okay, yes, that's fine. Come through.